Are you trying to navigate this crazy thing called life? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Unraveling with Rain. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today I'm here with Ivan Gutierrez, who is a photographer and graphic design artist, and he is also the author of Home Across from Home. Thanks for coming, or being here with me.
Thank you for having me.
I don't get to do very many of these, Skype version recordings, so it's always interesting. We'll see how this goes.
Well, it's my first time, so hopefully it works out.
It'll be beautiful. So, tell us a little bit about the book first.
Well, it's a memoir, so it's about me. I had been wanting to write the book for a while. It's this story that a lot of people have heard about illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. My family, like so many other families, made this choice to migrate. And when I was living in the States, I found some stories that I could kind of relate to, but I never found my story. And so I always wanted to write my story. And I'm doing it for me, but I also hope to obviously touch. I think when you share a story, you want it to reach somebody, and that it means something to somebody.
Sure.
But
in my experience, the best way we can help others is by healing ourselves and by, doing our own thing and venturing on our own journey. So that's awesome.
Yes. I mean, you're absolutely right. Working on ourselves is very important, because if we're not ready for the world, then we can't really do anything with it,
That's so true. So true. So tell me a little bit about your writing process.
Writing the book, it was a bit of a struggle at the beginning. Because I didn't know. I mean, you obviously have to know what kind of story you want to tell, and I wasn't sure. I was like, I just want to tell my story, and then after I just started writing. I was like, I'm just gonna start writing all the things that I think are important. And at some point while I was doing that, I just thought to myself, well, let's just follow the normal, how life moves from the beginning to the end. Mm-hmm. And that actually changed eventually, because the book actually starts at the end and then it goes to the beginning and it moves up. It's a little awkward, but it works. But I mean, just sit down and write. Like that's what I just kept telling myself. Sit your ass down and write some stuff, and eventually you'll have something,
Right.
You might have to get some stuff out. I mean, if I were to look in the book right now, I would be like, I could have done this better, but that's just how things go.
Yeah, totally. And it's your first piece of work, and it's going to be what it is, and it's raw, it's real, and that's perfect.
And you got to move on to the next thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I can totally relate with that process of being a writer and just forcing yourself to sit and write something, anything. Like, that little bit is so, important. Even if you have a set topic that you're looking to write about, just sitting down to actually, put the words out there. I don't know how long I struggled with that part of writing myself. Just self-discipline.
Yeah, we got a restless mind. So I've been writing stuff in this little book for a long time, but it's just random thoughts. I'll look through it. I mean, I'm amazed. I'm just like, oh man, this is cool. Like, when did I write this? But yes, you have to just write everything down. Obviously, if you want to do a specific project, then it comes down to that. But if you're writing all those thoughts, you create a physical copy of that, and you can come back to it. Right now, actually, I'm working on another project, and I was able to incorporate a lot of these thoughts that I wrote for several years into. So yes, I mean, if you want to do a project and you're not certain what it is you want to do, start writing all your ideas down. Everybody's got ideas,
Yeah, totally. It's amazing how those little bits of information that you look back on, you're like, oh, okay, I see where that fits in, or I see where that's going to be in play here. So tell me a little bit more about, I know that you probably don't want to discuss the entire book, but tell me a little bit about like the origin story of where this even came out of. So your parents were in the U.S., they came to the U.S., and then you were born, or you were actually born outside of the U.S.?
I'm a Mexican man,
Okay.
actually. So, other than my youngest brother, who his name is Ian, I think he's 7 years old. He's on the autism spectrum, actually.
Is he?
And he's the only one of us, the family, that was born in the U.S. He's a U.S. citizen. But the rest of the family, we're all from Mexico. It's a complicated story, but it's simple. I mean, there's not much to it. We were in Mexico, a happy family living in Mexico, and my father, he was in the military. He actually became a soldier when my older brother was born. So he was in the military. We were fine, and then my younger brother, not the youngest, but younger brother, his name is Alex, was born, and the pregnancy was great and there were no issues, but when he was born with some stomach issues, so they had to keep him in the hospital, and it eventually got so bad that we were just waiting for him to give up, for him. Yeah, it was a tough situation. I was a kid, but my mom, you could see how it affected her.
Yeah.
But what happened is my dad wasn't able to afford the medical expenses for all of this stuff. He asked for help, from the military, but they basically said, tough shit,
Gosh.
Good luck. And so my mother's family, some of her brothers and sisters were already in the U.S., and they had been mentioning to my dad, hey, you should come up here, you could make more money. Mm-hmm. But he was like, no, I got a job here. I can feed my family. I don't need to go anywhere.
Right.
But then this happened, and so he left. And he was gone for a while, and then my mom left. There's a whole story about that. Mm-hmm. And my mom couldn't be without her kids, so she went back to Mexico. And then my dad said something again. This is all in the book.
Sure, yeah.
And that's how we ended up all going.
Okay.
And my grandfather and my uncle, my mother's brother, they joined us. So on the journey across the desert, it was my mother, my grandfather, my uncle, and myself and my two brothers. We were all...
What does that look like? Like, what was that journey even like?
It's hard to explain it. I had been through some situations before then, but before or after, I've never been in a situation like that one.
Sure.
We got on a plane, we flew to Tijuana, and we get to this shitty motel, and I'm like, we don't know what's going on. My mom's taking care of everything. We just know we're gonna do something. We're gonna walk across the desert, go for a hike.
Oh my gosh.
Then we get in a taxi. We were given a specific phone number to call for a taxi that knew where to go. Taxi gets there, takes us to the middle of the desert. There's nothing out there, and then some guy comes out. The taxi driver says, "This is it. This is the spot." And we're just like, "You're gonna leave us in the middle of the desert?" Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
But then it was scary. And then some random guy comes out of the bushes. The taxi driver says, "That's your guy," and we get out, and he leaves. And the guy just says, "You have to throw away all your stuff. You can't have any bags." And we were like, my mom was like, we were told we could have a small bag. And he's like, nope, no bag. So everything was gone. We slept in the desert that night. Somebody brought us blankets, and we slept in the desert. There was a pregnant lady there. She was really pregnant. And I was just looking around at all the faces. There were probably like 30 other people there. Mm-hmm. We slept there, woke up in the morning, I remember the first time I saw the fence. Like, there was just a big rusty fence. And I had never seen a fence like it. It's tall, and there was a man sitting on top of it. We kind of see it in the distance. I was like, oh man, that guy's taking a long time to cross it. Like, he's just, what is he trying to get attention? Like, why isn't he jumping? Later, I found out that he was part of the crew. He was keeping a lookout so we could know when to cross. Yeah.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah. And then we got close to the fence. I saw it, and I'm like, how do you climb up this fence? Like, I was a wild kid all my life, so we'd climb fences and do all crazy stuff. But this, I didn't see a way to climb it. It was wavy, and it was just, I was like, how are we going to climb this?
Yeah.
They dug a hole. They actually dig a hole under the fence, and we just crawl. I thought about the pregnant lady. When I saw the hole, I was like, great, the hole. And then I was like, oh, fuck. My mom has to go through this. The pregnant lady has to go through this. It's going to suck for them.
Wow.
But, yeah, it was an interesting experience up to that point. Even.
I don't know if interesting really covers that. But it is a word to put there.
It should have been more intense. You know, we were kids. When my mom was gone, when she came to the U.S., when she went to the U.S., I'm not in the U.S. anymore. We were left with our grandparents, and they lived in a farm, and we just herd sheep in the mountains, and it was, you know, we were used to walking and hiking and all that stuff. It wasn't a big deal. But if I think about it now, a regular suburban kid in a situation like that, it's scary as shit, you know? But for me, it was just something slightly overwhelming because you don't know any of the other people, but my family was there. So that brought me a little bit of stability, yeah.
A little bit more comfort.
Sure.
Yeah. Wow, it's amazing how resilient we are as children. And the things that we experience, and we're like, wow, if I had to experience that today, or like if I had that kind of contrast in my life as an adult, that would just like rock my world. But as kids, like, we just experience these things and we're like, oh wow, that happened. Okay, that happened, you know. Is that what it was kind of like for you, looking back?
Yeah, and you know, there was a point where it got really scary because we were left alone, just my family. You know, the coyote, this is the guide, our spiritual guide through the desert. He took everybody else to a different spot and left us, just my family. And we were like, okay, he's gonna leave us here in the middle of the desert after hiking for like 3 hours.
Jeez.
And that was scary, but if I think about that scary part where we could have died because we didn't have any water, we didn't have anything. And then I think about the years following that experience where I didn't know the language, there was racism, there was, you know, I was different, I was poor, but I had always been poor, but in the US, you see a lot less poor people around, so you feel more out of place. So there were all of these things that together made me feel really insignificant, and you're trying to fight that, and so that was a huge struggle. And this happened for several years, while the other one was like a day. I was 11 years old.
Okay.
I was 11 years old. Yeah.
You're well established in your way of being and way of living and your language and everything by 11, and then to come to a completely different environment, that's intense.
You know, we'd had a lot of changes throughout our childhood, my brother and I, up to that point. But after my mother left, we moved to a different town, and in that town, I was more interested in. I formed better relationships, and I was more involved. I joined a soccer league, and so I was getting more involved. I was starting to build an identity, and all of a sudden, that gets ripped away. And you get shipped to another land where, it is a shock. Definitely a shock.
So how was it learning English at that point in your life? So that way you can at least communicate with more people around you.
You know, when we get to the U.S., the only word I knew, my brother taught it to me in the desert. It was what time is it? The only phrase I knew, what time is it? I get to school, the teacher asked me for my name, and I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. But it's an ESL course, so there are Spanish-speaking students there, and so they translate. So there's this little space where there are other people like me. So there isn't a real need to speak English yet. You know, I don't see it. But then there's a whole world outside of ESL class. And yes, I did have not immediately, but eventually I developed this need to want to communicate with other people. Because, you know, you see pretty girls that you can talk to, or, you know, it sucks. There was this girl in my math class that would make fun of how we would pronunciate things, you know. Pronounce things, sorry. My English is still bad. Pronounce things.
Beautiful.
And she would just blatantly make fun of us. And I'm like, okay, I would like it if people couldn't make fun of me for that anymore. And so I started trying. I started trying really hard to learn the language. And it took me a while to get a good hold of it. I think by the third year in the States, I could communicate really well with people, but there was still a hint of an accent there that I just fought really hard to get rid of. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, that's kind of at 11 developmentally to learn a whole new language. That's pretty amazing. I mean, people learn new languages all the time, but even still, you know, if you're not even really exposed to it, that's crazy.
It's definitely a challenge. And, you know, other kids, my brother who is 2 years older than me, you could see how he struggled a little bit more just because he was just a little bit older. Yeah.
So aside from, you know, trying to find your way in this new place, I'm sure that there was, and maybe you didn't have to deal with it because you weren't the parent in the situation, but what does the process look like? I mean, you come to the U.S. and, you know, documentation and getting into school, and like, what did that process even look like?
Well, as far as, you know, school goes, the public school system doesn't, you know, if you're a kid, you should be in school.
Right.
We don't care who you are, you should be in school. You just have to get your shots. You have to go get our shots. And my brother had all of them, but I was missing a couple. And so I went in to get a couple of my shots. And the other stuff that we weren't as involved in, like housing and stuff like that, my father, obviously, he was living somewhere. He wasn't homeless. He was living with my uncle, and he allowed us to stay there. So we stayed with my uncle. We had a bedroom. My older brother and I shared a bedroom, and then my parents and my younger brother, they shared a bedroom. We stayed there for a while. Eventually, we were these kids that were ripped out of the mountains, so we're super wild. And my aunt, she's like, yeah, these guys have to go, because they're like playing video games all day, wrestling, you know, punching holes in the walls. They have to go. So eventually my uncle had no choice but to tell us to go. And we found the place in a bad neighborhood, of course, because we couldn't afford anything better. But yeah, I mean, my dad had been working 3 jobs for a while before we arrived, and he continued to do so. Growing up, I remember before meeting him again in the U.S., he was this big authoritative man who just, you know, you feared him just looking at him. You know, we got chances to look at him in uniform, so that's huge. Yeah, but when we saw him again in the U.S., he was pale. He didn't have the same energy to him. You could see that he was starting to get exhausted. You know, he was starting to get exhausted from all the work. But I mean, the basics. We had a place to live. We went to school. Our parents worked. That was it. Yeah.
So, based on your experience of coming to the U.S., I'm sure you have some thoughts on the whole immigration system and how it works currently, and what things that you might want to see changed in that system?
Well, I'm probably, just because I was an immigrant, it doesn't mean that I'm a good person to have an opinion on this. However, there are some interesting concepts in the U.S. and how they handle immigration, and not just the U.S. I live in Spain now, and there's a lot of immigration here, and actually in the area where I live, they just elected some far-right people because of the immigrants. But so you and I used to live in Central Washington. Mm-hmm. A lot of what keeps up Central Washington is the farming and orchards. You see a lot of orchards. They've got a system now where they bring in people from Mexico, and I just know Mexico, but on the contract. And this is the legal way to work in the U.S. If you want to be an immigrant. But you don't get to bring your family. You're there for like 9 months, and your family's back home. And that sucks. Like, we want you to give us your time, but we don't want you, Mm-hmm. So I think it's important, like, on that aspect, who does the U.S. want to be? Who is the U.S.? What image do they want to portray? Mm-hmm. Obviously, the people who get these jobs appreciate it, even if they have to leave their families behind. As far as illegal immigration goes, my family had this thing, no plans to go to the U.S. We were happy in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Lots of families make tough choices because they find themselves in a difficult situation. This is everywhere, not just Mexican and Central American and South American people that choose to make difficult choices. Mm-hmm. Lots of people have to make difficult choices, and it's hard for people that are not in that situation to understand. Like, why would you do that? Why would you leave your country? Like, why wouldn't you just stay in your country? It's like, well, I mean, shit, because I thought it was a good idea. Why can't you respect my choices,
Life happens, man, and you have to make these decisions, Yeah,
and, people argue, well, why do it illegally? Why can't you do it the right way? The right way, right? Well, people try. My family thought, could we apply for a visa and try to go? Well, my family didn't have much to offer. My father was in the military, but his education went up to middle school, and my mother, not even elementary school. So they're not what the U.S. wants when you go to apply for a visa. Mm-hmm. It's understandable. But then you go to the U.S. and yet you're somehow able to survive. Mm-hmm. If illegal immigrants were not able to survive, and this might be controversial. My parents have been illegal while they were living in the U.S. But if they are able to survive there, then they're going to stay there, Mm-hmm. If you really don't want illegals in the U.S., stop allowing them to survive in the U.S., And that's as simple as it gets. But there's a purpose. There's a purpose for people, That's why they are there. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of, as with everything else in life, trying to understand, take a step back and realize that there are reasons for everything. Everybody's got a reason to do something, and you just have to do your best to try to understand.
I agree. And I think it's amazing how we as humans, we narrow our sight so far down when we're talking about laws and how procedures are, and we forget that we're all people trying to be people, interacting with other people who do have emotions. And like you're saying with this work program where they come and they're separated from their family for 9 months, and just think about how much more prosperous, not just the U.S., but that person could be if they had their family, if they had that support system. It boggles my brain. It's like, we're all people.
I was actually writing about something like this not too long ago, how exactly what you said, these really basic concepts, we just move them to the side and we're like, okay, well, yes, I get it, they're people too, but it's like, no buts, they're people, put yourself in somebody else's shoes for a second. It's really, not a complicated idea.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you all so much for listening. If you would like to help support Unraveling with Rain, go to patreon.com/unravelingwithrain. When you become a patron, you receive bonus content such as behind-the-scenes footage, along with other special content that you won't be able to find anywhere else. Music for Unraveling with Rain was provided by Barefoot Randy.